All right, a check on cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin briefly falling below $93,714 to erase a more than 30% gain this year. It peaked, of course, at the record of more than 126,000 in October. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana in positive territory as we speak right now. Institutional buyers pulling back after that Bitcoin tumble. Let's get perspective from Zann, Kwan, Managing Partner and CIO at Revo Capital Family Office. Also with us, Esme, Head of Capital Markets and Strategic Intelligence at CertiK. Good to have you both with us. Zann, let's start with you. What do you make of this, well, some say unraveling of cryptocurrencies?
Sure. If you look at what's happening in the data side, Bitcoin has just appreciated actually less than 5% this year on year, or since January, just slightly under 3%. And however, a lot of times you look at why do institutions get into Bitcoin or allocate into Bitcoin is to really deal with the debasement risk. So on the US dollar side, it has depreciated 9% this year. So in terms of that, -9 plus 3, so you are thinking if you are allocating into Bitcoin, you have allocated, even though in the backdrop of a weak market, you are already 12% up in that sense. So I think with that, and you have seen DAT, Digital Asset Treasury, building up, accumulating digital asset on their balance sheet, and also more institutions, including family office, allocating or rotating some from gold and some of the other asset classes into digital assets.
Esme, why the sell-off in the first place? It is a confluence of factors, right? Including, a revision of expectations of the Fed cuts.
Right, you're absolutely right. So what we're seeing in the market is that the investors are basically questioning whether they should be recalibrating expectations. So just going back to the October 11th and 12th pullback, so we can see that it's causing a vicious cycle of deleveraging and also liquidity air pocket. So for example, what we're seeing right now is that people are taking risk off away from risky tech equities and AI proxies and away from crypto assets and into safe haven assets, for example, gold. So what I see from here is I expect there to be a continuous recalibration as investors take profit from the year-to-date October rally, and also for them to shift to more safe haven assets.
Well, why haven't cryptocurrencies recovered fully from that October crash? When you take a look at, the equity markets, for instance, they've continued to test new highs.
Well, that's essentially the different ways in which the equity markets and traditional capital markets trade compared to crypto. So, for example, crypto, there's a lot of macro linkages. So even when Trump announces a 100% tariff, that releases a shock that would cause a domino effect, and that essentially leads to a liquidity squeeze in which market makers and also exchanges have more wider spreads, and also them pulling out liquidity from the markets. As a result, we see a lot of thinning of price movement, and also for a lot of forced selling. And that's causing a domino effect throughout the market.
Is there extreme fear in the crypto space then? I mean, we're talking about massive movements.
Sure. I think right now, if you look at the extreme of fear, greed index is at 10, which means it's an extreme fear. But if you look at what happened on October 10, you're talking about $350 billion drop in market and 19 billion in a day liquidated. So with that, I think the market is still recovering from the scars of the 10-10 sell-off. But having said that, if you look at not just on Bitcoin, there are other segments in the digital asset themes that are actually doing not too bad, relatively actually gaining grounds this few days as some of the within the market, they are shifting away from some of the majors to other digital assets.
We're talking about a pullback at a time when there's so much optimism about President Trump's digital approach and regulation, yet this massive move downwards. How do you square that?
Okay, I think one is the correlation with the Max 7. If you look at the Max 7 correlation and Bitcoin, it is very correlated right now. However, so if you ask me, is there overselling this time in the short term? I believe there is. If you look at the technical analysis on that front and the macro side remains strong, right? We talk about the debasement risk, buying Bitcoin, allocating Bitcoin to deal with that risk. And I think now on the Clarity Act, which is going to sign into law, that itself will remove uncertainty. And what happened during the government shutdown is you're talking about 41 days of no data. I think that itself spoke the market. But having said that, we are, in terms of the next few months and quarter, we believe that Bitcoin will recover.
In terms of the correlation between Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and Mag 7, Esme, what are your own expectations? Because, you know, when you take a look at the Mag 7, some say that we're going to continue to see a correction in the market.
Right. So in terms of the correlation between risky assets, for example, crypto and also equity, so I believe that the fellow interviewer has already very clearly expressed the correlation. So what I'm expecting going forward is that there needs to be market structure change, and I think right now global policymakers has already been working on that. So for example, the FCA and also Bank of England has put out a joint consultation regarding stable coins. So I believe that looking forward to next year. So we're going to see strength around the ecosystem and also the infrastructure plays. So I'm positive in terms of infrastructure, custody, and also ETFs, new investment products, anything that's along the lines of regulation. And the second part to that is that with institutional capital flowing in with clearer guidelines, so I believe that the market is going to trade closer to fundamentals and also less mispricing and less reaction to X and also Twitter headlines.
But it's still going to be contingent on Fed moves. If the Fed fails to cut in December, we can expect that correction in the crypto space to continue. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, I believe so. At the same time, I think there's going to be some looks.
Go ahead, Esme.
Yeah, at the same time, I think the market will be looking for two data points, which will be the litmus test as to whether it's going to be a prolonged sell-off or rather it's a recalibration of expectations short term. So number one will be around the empirical data around data books, order books, and also around data funding rates of exchanges. So that's going to be a testimony of the liquidity that's out there. And the second is related to pricing. So how wide the spreads are around the exchange rates will be a second factor that's going to influence the market.
And Zann? I think I want to focus on Clarity Act, which will be coming into play. I think with that, we know that in the market, crypto exchanges market, the Wall Street could contribute from anything from 30 to 70%. So when regulation come out, we're going to, in a way, fix that, and that itself will remove some market manipulation and some of those market moves that will, in that sense, be not so volatile going forward. And a lot of price movement, if you look at for the past few months, a few weeks, cannot be explained to what are the strong macro underlying currents or the tailwinds behind digital assets, particularly Bitcoin. So with that, with I think the regulatory clarity coming out, that we think that will actually move the market, the entire market, into positive zone.
So you're saying less volatility can be expected once that happens, and will that encourage even more institutional interest in cryptocurrencies?
I think in 2025, we've already seen a lot of institutional interest at the sideline. I think a lot of family offices and also even listed company looking at allocating. So they are in a way getting ready. I think 2025 is the year of observation and getting ready. So I think 2026 is we will continue to see inflow, strong institutional inflow into the market.
So how big in terms of the holdings in a portfolio, for instance? What are you seeing? How much are people holding cryptocurrencies in their portfolio?
Sure. I think last year on the show, we talked about as much as 10%. I think there are some families and some institutions and, as I said, private company and listed co are allocating anything, I would say, that I've seen, or either from thinking of allocating to a few percentage below 5 to all the way double digit.
And what's your take on that, Esme?
I'd like to quote from my conversations with the asset managers, for example, the largest holders and also the issuers of ETFs and also digital asset treasuries, as well as with stablecoin issuance and distribution. And then what I'm hearing is that obviously in the past market cycles, we've had multiple instances in which there were crying wolves, and then that didn't really materialize in terms of institutional inflows. But why I believe that next year is going to be different is because you can see that, number one, as Zann rightfully mentioned, so there's been a softening and also a warming up in stance when it comes to the U.S. and also global jurisdictions. So that's number one. And number two is that in the back of tokenization, RWA, and also stable coins, so you can see that that's going to drive a lot more institutional inflow. Just quoting from a statistics, so looking forward to the next 4 years, so stablecoins liquidity is going to be 50% dominated by institutions as a prediction, as opposed to 5 to 10% right now.
So we're potentially looking at a bull market ahead. I mean, you know, it is a divided world. Some say we're actually looking at the start of a bear market. How do you start thinking about the crypto cycle? How do you make sense of it?
Right, so as we know, the crypto cycle is normally 4 years, and then next year would be the routine start of the bear market. But what I believe is that next year we're going to see a tighter hug around institutionalization. So that's going to lead to market structure change, which I do emphasize. For example, regulations, that's going to distort the regular bull-bear cycle, and now we're going to see fundamentals kicking in. So therefore, I reiterate my stance and being positive around infrastructure, and also those who are we're really seeing real use cases and also user activity, institutional activity, and also regulatory blessing.
So Zann, bull or bear? And when do you buy the dip?
Okay, so I think one thing that is stopping some of the flow coming in is the uncertainty around counterparty risk. I think when the families and institutions are doing due diligence on that front, that is what stopped them, because they don't know what to ask and couldn't see through what ultimately the counterparty risk is. I think with, again, the clarity in terms of regulation, that will reduce the counterparty risk, and which will also increase confidence. So in fact, when we talk about the 4-year cycle, the bull and the bear market seem to be lengthened. So the question is that, is there still a 4-year cycle? I think with that, coupled with what's going on the regulatory front and the macro scene, we are still bullish in the mid to long term. But I guess in the short term, there will be volatility until all this regulation settle in, as institutions also get comfortable in allocation and understand what to do behind the due diligence.
Are there factors that investors are not paying enough attention to?
Yes, that means that not all eyes on Bitcoin and some on Solana, but there are fragments of the digital asset on liquid tokens that could be bullish in the next quarter or the next year.
Such as?
Such as, for example, the privacy token segment.
And how high can they go?
Some people deem that as like what I call it the new Bitcoin, all had different use cases, what Bitcoin couldn't do. I think with that, one of the questions to ask on the OGs, on the digital asset source of wealth, where are they going to park their money? I think that is one question. If we could answer that, we could know or where to see where the bear market or the bull market is.
And Esme, in terms of where you should be parking your money in the crypto space, what are the best bets right now?
Right now, I always believe it's stablecoin issuers and also some private companies that are on the verge of IPO. So I'll be looking out for exchanges, custodians, and also tokenization platforms. So I'll primarily be looking at the intersection between traditional capital markets, equities, as well as with digital assets. I think that is the area to play for institutional money in the next 2-3 years.
One last question to both of you. Where will Bitcoin end the year? Esme?
I would say 12K, 120K.
120K?
Okay, I put the line between Chinese New Year and the New Year. I think between 140 to 150.